Bystander footage has captured the moments before the killing of 37-year-old Minneapolis man Alex Pretty by federal immigration officers. Federal and state officials have conflicting accounts of the events that led to Pretty's death. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says agents fired defensive shots after Pretty reacted violently, while Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says the account of events from federal authorities is nonsense and lies. The family of the man shot is asking for truth as the senator calls for an investigation.
Individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. About hundreds of protesters then showed up at the scene. They began to obstruct and to assault law enforcement officers. We saw objects being thrown at them, including ice and other objects, and a rampant assault began, and even an HSI officer agent's finger was bitten off. Crowd control measures were deployed to bring safety to the public and to law enforcement at the scene. And once again, I want to remind everybody that this situation and this tragedy did not have to happen. Our law enforcement are doing everything that they can to protect the public. We're praying for this deceased loved one's family and friends, but we also recognize that the Minnesota governor and the Minneapolis mayor need to take a long, hard look in the mirror. They need to evaluate their rhetoric, their conversations, and their encouragement of such violence against our citizens and our law enforcement officers. I'll remind you that Governor Walz today in his press conference said that our officers were not even law enforcement, which is a lie. He's called them the Gestapo. He's encouraged residents and citizens and violent rioters to resist. He's doxed their identities, putting themselves and their families' lives in jeopardy. He's refused to turn over murderers to federal law enforcement officers. He's protected illegal criminals and protected them from being brought to justice, and even overseen a historic, unprecedented theft of American taxpayer dollars. Tens of billions of dollars were stolen under his watch, and he allowed it to happen, and in some instances may have even facilitated it.
Well, Angela Fobbs is live with me to discuss the death of Alex Pretty earlier and the role of immigration or customs in the United States. A sad weekend. Here we are again talking about another issue with regards to, immigration, ICE and all. How should the Minneapolis shooting affect the U.S.'s global reputation and diplomatic relations, particularly with countries that have criticized its immigration policies?
Well, under Donald Trump, I think we look like a joke to the international community, and that the Minneapolis shootings just reinforce longstanding international concerns about U.S. immigration and enforcement and the use of force. Also, this is one other small joke would be Trump's Board of Peace, that he can't maintain peace and safety in his own country, but he wants to impose his will on others.
So what implications does this incident have for the U.S.'s human rights record? And how might it impact international cooperation on migration and security issues? We earlier spoke with a spokesperson from the Republican Party who said the man in question had a gun on him. And, we've talked about gun control issues several times, but where, it was just a back and forth with a more professional way to handle this. What do you make of that?
Well, the man who was shot, he did have a gun, but it's perfectly legal in Minnesota if you're licensed to have a concealed carry gun. That's not really the question. The question is how much violence did ICE or DHS or whomever they're calling themselves today use for what reason? The man that was shot was only trying to help a woman who was pepper sprayed, and he was a nurse. So I think that this could have a great impact on how the world sees us and how we treat immigrant communities in the United States. And the fact that our that our government lied about what happened. Everyone could see this for themselves. He didn't do anything to these officers, and it's just a shame. It saddens me that the United States has come to this.
So, what measures can the democratic states take to address concerns about ISIS tactics and ensure the safety and rights, like you mentioned, of its citizens, particularly in communities with high immigrant populations?
Well, I think that they can require more reporting on federal operations in their states, and they need to empower their states' attorney generals to investigate any use of force incidents involving federal agents. They also need to expand legal networks and community safety programs in immigrant neighborhoods, and they can use litigation to challenge unconstitutional practices or any of the practices that ICE or DHS is using, since they are all very brutal and don't really adhere to American standards.
So, Angela Fobbs, what role can the courts, let's not forget about the courts, what role can they play in promoting transparency and accountability in the investigation into the Minneapolis shooting? I did hear Tim Walz, the governor, earlier talking about this has to end in the courts, but then it seems like there's a loss in the trust of, the courts in the U.S.
Well, it's not the lower courts. It is more of the Supreme Court that people have lost faith in. Our lower courts are working diligently and providing rulings to protect people from the sort of violence that the Trump administration, DHS, and ICE are using on people. And the courts can compel disclosure of evidence. They can protect the rights of witnesses and journalists and set limits on federal operations. And they can also try to require reforms that will increase transparency and accountability. The main question is, if the courts require it, will the Trump administration actually do it?
And also, how would the U.S. government's response to this incident impact its ability to address global challenges such as migration, terrorism, and also what are the potential consequences for global stability? I say this, I asked that question having at the back of my mind the fact that the Trump administration also, I did say this earlier, wants a situation where there would be, every American should own a gun and all of that. And then his reaction to Ringood's death is, well, it was done in self-defense. So we can tell what the reaction will be from this, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone in America, according to some people, should have a gun. There should be no rules. And every American should walk around carrying a gun. And then when they do, then they're considered dangerous by this sort of pseudo legal organization of DHS and ICE. I think how the world is viewing America now, I mean, in my personal opinion, it makes me sad, and that we're no longer seen as the home of the brave, a place where people want to visit. And I feel like these actions that our government are taking really raise questions about our ability to host the World Cup and the Olympics, and that our government's response is shaping our international standards, and we're no longer seen as a positive place to visit or to move to. I'm not sure that unless we can do something about the Trump regime, that we're going to constantly be seen as the bad ones in every situation, because we're not treating people that are inside of our own country We're not treating people that migrate there well. We're not treating people who live there. We're not treating people who visit the United States well, and we're not treating its own citizens well. So the only thing that I can suggest that people do is, if you're outside of the United States and you're an American, please vote in this election so that we can have some justice and we can have some accountability.
Thanks for the time, Fobbs. She's the Director of Strategic Initiatives, Democrats Abroad. She joined us to further touch on the Minneapolis fatal shooting.